Hi, welcome to Rachel's Midnight podcast. Or, honestly, I don't know. This is a podcast. It's kind of just like my debriefing of the movie Bad Hair, which, in my opinion, was a cinematic masterpiece. I said this like 10 seconds ago, but I effed it up. I'm gonna have to cuss later, so let's just be honest. I fucked it up, so I had to restart. And so, to begin, I'm gonna give you a quick summary of the film Bad Hair. So the movie starts off with a young girl with her kinky curls, and her sister is putting perm in her hair. And then once the young girl with the perm in her hair starts telling her sister it's burning, she needs to wash it out. Eventually, her sister finally starts rinsing it out, but once she starts rinsing it out, her hair starts falling out. And so immediately they flash forward to a few years later where the girl is an adult and there's still a scar on the back of her head. And so essentially this film is a big commentary on the violence that Black bodies are subjected to in order to succeed in capitalism, and specifically in the white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. And I feel like this film overall is, to a degree, like a much more artistic portrayal of the Bell Hooks documentary that we watched. Like, there are a lot of similar themes, but more just described through art rather than words. And so I thought that was a really cool way to critique all of these things and make us think about them rather than just listing it off for us in like a more boring way. And like instead we have art, which is also, I think, a main theme in this film. So I have a lot of themes that I want to talk about, so let me finish this summary. I'm sorry. And so in the film, she wants to work in media. She wants to be a hostess for a show, but basically everyone tells her she's too Black, she doesn't have the right look, so she just can't, and no one wants to really entertain her ideas of her being the front cover. And so she her boss convinces her that she must get a weave in order to be successful in the workplace. In fact, her boss says, you won't get past receptionist. She says, you won't get past receptionist. Sisters get fired for much less than this. And she's referring to her hair and kind of like the criminality of being Black in and of itself, and the criminality of having or possessing corporeal zones, which have certain inscriptions that deem Black women unvaluable. And this movie really explores this idea in a very interesting way. So in the end, she gets the weave, and her weave starts eating people. So she stabs someone and then they're bleeding, and then her weave will go into the cut and suck the life out of them. And so the whole idea behind this is a slave lore, which states that when blood keeps the hair alive, and eventually once the hair gets enough blood, the woman becomes only her body, and the witches take turns in her head. So connections to spells and witches, and not really gonna be able to explain that part that well because I didn't fully understand it, if I'm being honest with you. So, really quickly, I would like to discuss how this movie relates to Afrofuturism. So, to start off with this idea of how this movie portrays Afrofuturism, I want to describe the intentions of sci-fi movies and also the intentions of Afrofuturism. So the intentions of sci-fi, according to the article describing Afrofuturism, is to create a dramatic dark mirror or a hyperreality to dissuade the apathy-induced lens created through familiarity. So the purpose of films like this is to get rid of what we perceive as normal by making it much more dramatic and making us reconsider to what extent is this actually normal. And so Afrofuturism within this, the attention is more so rather than just defining the line of what is normal, is also to create space for Black critique to also dictate what is wrong and right or what should be normal. Because in the past, this dictation of whether something should be cared about is only been written about in the white perspective, but through Afrofuturism, we create space for Black critique to focus on Black futures and what that could potentially look like and how our present defines this. And so I thought that Bad Hair was a lot similar to the form of Afrofuturism that Beyonce uses. And this is because so there are a few reasons why I thought this. So the movie took place in the 80s, and so it's really alluding to how we are in the present, I feel like. When I watched it, it really reminded me of how, like, the stories my mom told me growing up and how she would always encourage me to straighten my hair and things like that. And it's just funny how it's like so dramatic in the way that the hair is consuming people. Really, like, the whiteness is consuming people and destroying them. But I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought because I was also thinking about how in the film the hair would eat people, but it never ate white people, which I thought was interesting because there were a few white actors in the movie, but it was always Black people. And then even in the end when they showed I lied. Her landlord that tried to rape her might have raped her. I don't know. It was a weird scene. And I'm kind of going everywhere, but this is my TED Talk, so I'm going to do what I want. So something that I thought was interesting was, really quickly. Something that I thought was interesting was this critique on capitalism, which I thought really mirrored what Bell Hooks was saying, in the way that words like racism really centralize the white gaze and make it seem very significant and of the highest priority, rather than actually resolving these systems that they put in place. And so this critique that they put on capitalism, oh my gosh, I'm still recording. So this critique that they put on capitalism, that her landlord broke into her home and tried to rape her, and she was able to escape him by saying, "Wait, can I put some music on? You don't want the neighbors to hear." And I thought it was interesting how they used the art form of music as her rescue, I guess. And I think that connects to the overall theme that the overall argument that they were trying to make, is that the future is Black art, and that is like our safe haven, which was a very interesting theme. But back to this argument on capitalism, I thought it was really interesting how in the movie there's really no safety from capitalism. There's really no getting away from it. And it's like the place, your home, the place where you're most vulnerable, the place where you think you're by yourself and you think you're most safe. There's really no real safety, because the man that owns it can literally just burst in and try to rape you. And that shit was just really triggering. That's also why I thought it connected to bell hooks, was because of how she discussed sexual violence and the normalization of sexual violence in the media, and how putting things like that on TV just makes it more normal for us to face in real life. But at the same time, I could also see how the film is kind of arguing that this is a real reality for Black women to be exploited by the people that we're supposed to trust and that we're supposed to confide in and feel safe with. And another really interesting part of the rape scene was how when he like jumped on top of her, they flashed to an image of her bleeding scalp. And I thought that really just put into focus the spectrum of violence that Black women face, and how the spectrum of violence is just incredibly traumatic, and it just feels never ending, and how it just all really connects. It definitely all really connects, especially like the reasons why she's being exploited and attacked by her hair and by this white man. It's because they're trying to take everything she owns. And I just really like the movie because in the end, I think they wrapped it up quite well. They were talking about how the slave lore, the original girl that this happened to, and then this is why it's happening to the girl, and now the girl that got the perm. But like in the 1800s, in the slave lore, the woman had she had taken branches from a tree and wore it as a wig, and then her wig started eating people, and her wig killed her master. And then in the end, they said that the land was taken over by the master's two sons, and as long as their name was on the land, they could do with it what they pleased. If it grew on their land, they owned it, and it owned them. And when they say it owned them, they're talking about the hair tree. And I think the hair tree just really is like the roots of whiteness and white culture. Yeah, I think it's the roots of white culture. But I thought this part was interesting because of how they said, and if it grew on their land, then they owned it, period. They just own that shit because they're that fucking entitled. And they were that entitled to Anne. They would literally tell her what to do, like they owned her. Tell her to change her hair. Tell her to have sex with her. Tell her to... There was also a scene with a significant other, and he tried to use her sexuality against her, and she liked sex toys, and he said, you can't tell anybody in the office about us, or else I'll tell them all about your weird fetishes. Like, nigga, you obviously have a fetish too because you're fucking with her. Like, I don't understand why you're trying to use her sexuality against her, and why someone that she thinks that she can trust is just literally exploiting her. Literally just using her for his own good use, and just literally has zero respect for her. But connects to another thing that I peeped in the movie, and this is a reference to the Jackson reading, and the caricatures of from slavery and how it conducts into the film industry. So there was I found it. So I'm gonna read you this quote and then I'll explain. So from the moment, so I'll do a little preface. She was talking to her uncle about why do these slave lords even matter? It's all a bunch of fairy tales. And then he replied to her, from the moment you are born, you are so thoroughly indoctrinated by the insanity of Western European worldviews. You can't bear to see yourself the way nature would have. And then this image, so it's like him talking very intensely to her, and then immediately after he says that, it flashes to an image of a Mammy cookie jar. And then it's her talking to her, like, mom. I should unquote that because that's problematic. But it was her talking to her mom, or I guess she was adopted. I'm pretty sure. I don't know. Some parts of the story were a little hard to follow along. But she was talking to her mom about how she's at work and how she's working so hard and now she's about to be the main star, but she's really just tripping. And so what I wanted to bring up was how they flashed to this image of the cookie jar right after he said that she's brainwashed by these Western European worldviews. So another theme in the story is how she constantly is giving up so much of herself just in the names of success, but she's never ever like commended for her attributes and what she brings to this company. She starts a whole show, she starts this, she gets a new position title and she wants to be the host of the show, but then the light-skinned bitch swoops in and says that she'll host it instead. And so the Mammy character in the Jackson readings were portrayed her as someone that was incredibly selfless and always put others' emotional needs over their own, and was a very like desexualized person, and was seen as very like asexual. And so I think that kind of connects to why he was trying to use her sexuality against her, because it's like, oh, you shouldn't even be sexual, and now you're even weirder because you like these toys. Like, it was a lot. It was a lot. And I'm not too sure. Cookie jar. Oh yeah. So I kind of already said this, but the main character, she really internalizes everyone else's needs before her own. And it's like everyone's need for her to look a certain way, and then like the sexual needs of the guy that she likes, the needs of the company, of the landlord, how she literally had his money and he still tried to assault her. It was really messed up. So in conclusion, I'm gonna wrap this up. I've been talking for a really long time. So sorry this is so long. Hopefully coherent. And I think that the movie is really trying to make the claim that the future is Black art. And they do this in a very meta way because of how they literally discuss like the company culture, how black music is going to be the future, and how they're ahead of everyone else because they're the only ones willing to release or support such artists. And so also along with that though, the future is black art, and it's also black horror, black Afrofuturistic films, and so much more. And you know, the future is black art really connects to how she was able to save herself from the assault. I mean, I don't know if she saved herself. It was a weird scene. But she was able to defend herself to an extent by, it was interesting how they say like violence is not the answer. But telling him that she was going to play some music was enough time for her to figure out something else. And she turned towards violence, and it kind of didn't really work out for her because then it just started the whole cycle of her hair consuming people. And so this critique brings the question, in what ways should black art be infused into pop culture? And I thought this was a very interesting question, as the company was owned by white people, but they had black people working for them. And so that definitely connects to what they said in the end about how if it grew on this land, then they own it and it owned them. And it just really makes me think this world is so fucked up, because it is. It really is. Capitalism is literally the devil. I live through it every day. It is my hell on earth. And to end this out, I'm going to discuss what this movie has inspired for me. I recently, in my poetry group, I was leading a writing prompt, and I told everyone to write about a monster in their lives. And, well, at first, I made them watch the trailer for this movie, and then I made them discuss what is something that they were taught to hate about themselves that you now wish, like, either like the younger version of yourself or other people that looked like you knew that they should love. And it's just like the amount of self-hatred that everyone is taught to internalize is incredibly frustrating. And the idea that this self-hatred has purpose in our life, will bring us value, will bring us wealth, because that's how you succeed in capitalism, is incredibly fucked up and not the answer. It is just not the answer. I gotta tell you, it's not the solution. And I don't know, should I be done? Should I read my poem? I don't know. I've written a lot of poems about how much I hate capitalism, but I think this movie just did a really good job putting into words how harmful that shit is on black people's mental, and how harmful it is just to our well-being, and how much we are subjected to violence in order for this capitalistic system to thrive. And to close me out, I'm gonna read my poem. I wrote this one today. I walk around on this plot of earth and become infatuated by the breathing colors. There's green, red, yellow, orange, shades that you can only imagine. So I pluck a tomato and take a bite. Heaven on earth is in my mouth. But then the owner walks by. Caught in their eye, they shout at me, telling me I have sinned, taken a piece of their property, of which they have murdered for. Tell me how your property is real. Is it all of the unpure blood hidden beneath the land? Is it the pureness in your blood that naturally gives you the right to take it as yours? I only see crackers owning land, so I depend on them. for anything I could need, from food to a job to everything. So may I have permission to play on your land, please, so that I may not starve and also be able to sustain myself on these indigenous traditions that brings you billions annually. Man, fuck capitalism. Richiana out.